Hey, it's your guy Tyrrell back with the interviews. In today's video, we're going to briefly analyze the main tactical issue Bayern encountered in their underwhelming first half display against RB Leipzig, despite their 5-1 win that moved them closer to retaining their Bundesliga crown. So when we break it all down and we do look at the board, like we said in our previous video, you had Bayern in a 4-2-3-1, and Leipzig in also more of a 4-2-3-1 that became a 4-4-2 out of possession. Here we're going to focus on Bayern's pressing because that did lead to some of the issues that they did encounter, and we're going to closely dissect the issues that they encountered out of possession when we break down some examples of how Leipzig were able to get into legitimate goal scoring positions. So when we look at Bayern's initial approach, like I said, they are in a 4-2-3-1, but they ended up pressing in a 4-4-2, and rather than having Gnabry helping Kane close down the center backs, they were focused on having 3v3 in that midfield zone, and they would have Pavlovic dealing with Baumgartner, and then Goretzka and Gnabry dealing with the double pivot. What ended up happening here was that Diaz closed down Baku, and you had Lennart Karl stepping out towards the center back to close him down, and he was looking to block off the passing lane in towards the Leipzig left back. The issue here was that if that ball bypasses Karl, he does have to get back. And if he doesn't get back in time, then you're expecting Bischoff to push forward to close down the left back. That would leave the left-sided attacking player free, and Upamecano would have to step out to close him down as well. Now, there were examples where you ended up witnessing some variation. For example, there was a time where you had Gnabry stepping out towards the left back, and it was Upamecano stepping out to Baumgartner. But for the most part, this Bayern press was as prescribed, and when they did it effectively, they did a very good job of ensuring that Leipzig couldn't play out of their half and get into dangerous positions, and that often saw Karl doing a very good job of closing down the center back to ensure that he couldn't push the ball forward. Or the other example would be that if he was bypassed, Bischoff did a very good job of closing down the left back immediately. The central midfielders were 3v3 in that zone, and then Upamecano would also step out towards the left-sided wide player to close him down if Bischoff was bypassed. Now, the issue with the press was that if Karl was bypassed and Bischoff didn't get out in time, Leipzig had an outlet to play the ball around that press, and they would have Upamecano being dragged out to cover too much space, and this would see Leipzig being able to get into dangerous positions. They were able to do that in various manners, and it often stemmed with the fact that they were able to get the ball out and towards that zone, bypass the center backs, and then have runners breaking off the Bayern midfield trio. The other way that they could exploit Bayern was that if they did bypass that press, they were able to switch the ball out and towards the wider areas, and then from there they'd be able to exploit the fact that neither Diaz or Karl were doing a good job of tracking back, and they were able to create overloads because the fullbacks were willing to make underlapping and overlapping runs. And even if the Leipzig wide players didn't combine with the fullbacks, it created enough space for them to get into shooting angles or to get into positions where they could create. Not only was Leipzig's wide overload threat identified when they bypassed the Bayern press, but it was also when they were able to win possession in the midfield zone or get to loose balls, and then quickly switch the ball out towards that wide area where the Bayern shape wasn't set, and from there they were looking to get their fullbacks forward and have their wide players run at the Bayern fullback. If you look to an example here, you have the Bayern left back that is being dispossessed, and from there Leipzig are able to switch the ball out towards their left-sided attacking player to get into a 1v1 against Bischoff, and here he has the space to cut on towards his right foot, and you could see that there are runs being made off of Goretzka and Pavlovic, and then runs in between the two center backs. A reverse ball is played here in towards left half space, and this creates an avenue for a pullback across the 6-yard area. You could see that both Goretzka and Pavlovic are taken out of the game, and you have two runners breaking free towards the 6-yard area as the center backs are ball watching and the left backs recovering. And luckily for Bayern here, Taz able to clear the cross in towards the 6-yard area to prevent a tap-in. And then here you could see, following a poor clearance from Bayern in their own third, that the left center back nods the ball over Karl into the path of Nusa, and you could see that the left back's making an overlapping run and Karl isn't tracking it, and that ends up allowing Nusa to cut on towards his right foot. And even in this position, you have Pavlovic and Goretzka near their markers, and Upamecano is supposed to pick up the run of the left back, or simply step forward to close down Nusa for Karl. What ends up happening here is that you end up seeing Pavlovic and Upamecano ball watching. The ball isn't played in towards the left back, but Pavlovic and Goretzka both lose their marker, and that allows Baumgartner to make the run in between the two center backs, and from there Nusa clips the ball in towards his path, and he's able to chest the ball down in towards the 6-yard area. But luckily for Bayern here, he has difficulty bringing down the ball from this tight angle, and he ends up skying his effort over the net from point blank range. The other major issue that Bayern encountered here was that if Lukeba wasn't playing balls around Karl, he was simply carrying the ball beyond Karl, taking him out of the game, and then playing the ball in towards the Leipzig left back, or carrying the ball in towards the halfway line or in the Bayern half, where then he could play the ball into a midfielder who could progress the attack. There was a common theme here where the Leipzig left center back was capable of bypassing Karl, whether it be through passing or ball carrying, and that often led to Leipzig breaking the Bayern press and then getting themselves into position where they could harm Kompany's backline. So an example, we have Lukeba ahead of Karl, and he looks to carry the ball around the Bayern attacker in towards the final third, and as he drags Goretzka towards him, he ends up shifting his positioning towards the right channel, and from here he's ended up running at Diaz and the left back, and you could see both right-sided players looking to break forward. He ends up sliding the ball in towards the right-sided attacking player to put him in a 1v1, and that's where you witness the underlapping run, which creates space for the attacker to get the ball on towards his left foot, but he ends up dragging the ball back towards the byline, and from here he does a very good job of evading challenges, and he looks to play the ball in towards the 6-yard area for Nusa, and luckily for Bayern, Bischoff applies enough last-ditch pressure to ensure that Nusa can't have a free tap-in. Here you have Lukeba on the ball, and you can see Karl looking to block off the passing lane in towards the left back, but as he looks to step towards to apply pressure, Lukeba simply bypasses Karl with one pass, and you can see that Bischoff hasn't stepped out towards the left back, and Upamecano's going to have to cover for him. The left back slides the ball around Bischoff immediately, and now you have Nusa free in the left channel, and Upamecano has to shift over, but even when you look in central areas, Bayern should be okay because they are 3v2. What ends up happening here is that Nusa ends up playing the ball around Upamecano for the underlapping run of the Leipzig left back, and you could see that Bischoff doesn't track that run, and even when that ball is played, Bayern are still in a position where they are 3v2, but when that pass is played towards the left back in left half space, you could see that Goretzka doesn't track the movement in towards the 6-yard area, and Pavlovic and Ta are simply focused on the delivery in towards that zone, and the delivery ends up flying across Ta for Romulo Cruz, who gets across the center back and directs a point-blank effort beyond Neuer. And then the other compounding issue that was witnessed in some of Leipzig's better chances was that when that Bayern press was breached, or when Leipzig were looking to create chances on the overload, what ended up happening here was that Pavlovic and Goretzka were often caught ball watching or pulled out and leaving their markers free in the penalty area, and that allowed their markers, whether it be in transition or against a recovering back line, were able to make free runs across the center backs and get themselves into legitimate goal scoring positions to get on the end of deliveries from these wider areas. If you want to look to an example, you could see Pavlovic doing the dirty work for Diaz as he ends up stepping towards Baku, and you could see that Bayern, despite some positional changes, in a good position when the Leipzig right back looks to bypass the left back and the central midfield. He plays the ball in towards Romulo Cruz, and you can see that Ta isn't going to step towards him in time, but the issue here is that Goretzka isn't tracking his marker, so when Romulo Cruz receives the ball, he's able to backheel it around Ta into the path of the midfield run, and Goretzka's in no position to stop that. This forces Upamecano to shift across, but by then what ends up happening is that Nusa makes a good run across Bischoff, and the ball simply slid around Upamecano for Nusa to break free on goal from the edge of Bayern's third, and from here Bischoff can't recover, and he carries the ball in towards the penalty area in a 1v1, but from this position Bayern are lucky because he skies his effort over the net. So as you can see from several examples, there was a clear issue with how Bayern were approaching the game out of possession, and they were fortunate not to be down a few goals within that opening half, but we did witness signs of improvement within the end of that opening half, and it was simply a slight modification in how they looked to approach the game out of possession by simply having Gnabry joining Kane and stepping towards the center backs and ensuring that Karl and Diaz were closing down the fullbacks. Now, what ended up happening here was that now you simply just had Goretzka and Pavlovic dealing with the deepest Leipzig midfielders, and then having Ta and Upamecano stepping out towards the advanced midfielder and Romulo Cruz. The introduction of Kimmich and Olise didn't necessarily shift how Bayern were looking to approach approach the game out of possession when they made this adjustment. And there are several examples where you simply witness Pavlovic and Kimmich stepping towards those deep midfielders. Then you simply have the center backs dealing with the most advanced two Leipzig central attacking players. And the same thing was applicable if they looked to play through the midfield zone. Either Pavlovic or Kimmich were doing a very good job of stepping in to break up play or simply apply pressure to force Leipzig backwards. So as you can see, there were several examples where you just simply witness a more structured, disciplined, and organized and compact Bayern side out of possession. And frankly, the only manner in which Leipzig looked to breach this Bayern side following Kompany's adjustment was by playing balls over the top, and we witnessed that in two different manners in which they were able to have the center backs bypass the front two, pull out the central midfielders and the center backs, and then clip the ball in behind the fullbacks. And that ended up seeing them exploit the space in beyond Bischoff, and that's where you ended up seeing the midfielder running off Kimmich and using his pace to get beyond him. But as he broke in towards the penalty area, Ta was able to come across. And then there was an example where it was simply Baku playing the ball over the Diaz press and beyond the Bayern left back to play in his attacking wide player free on goal. But from this position, he failed to beat Neuer. So as you could see, there were several moments within the opening half where a combination of wide overloads, off-ball runs, and Bayern's pressing scheme presented several issues for the champions. But Kompany deserves credit here for making match-altering adjustments to secure maximum points.